ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابدون ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم السلام علیکم یا علی مدد. معزز سامعین، مولا حسین آپ کو سلامت رکھیں. میں ایک مرتبہ پھر حاضر ہوں سٹی آف نالج کی جانب سے. آپ تمام لوگوں کا ممنون ہوں، متشکر ہوں، اور مولا آپ کی تمام نیک حاجات کو پورا فرمائے. معزز سامعین، آج 9 اکتوبر ہے اور آج ہمارے ساتھ پاکستان سے جوائن کریں گے ہمیں سید رضا عباس زیدی، مولا ان کی توفیقات میں اضافہ کرے. اس سے پہلے میں ایک سوز پیش کروں گا. معزز سامعین، پنجابی میں یہ ایک سوز ہے جو کہ میر بھائی نے بھی پڑھا ہے اس کو، اور کربلا کی ماؤں کے حوالے سے یہ ایک کلام ہے کہ کربلا کی جو مائیں ہیں انہوں نے کس طریقے سے اپنے بچوں کو قربان کیا ہے مولا کے دین میں، مولا کے ذکر میں. اس حوالے سے یہ کلام ہے، ثقلین اکبر صاحب کا لکھا ہوا ہے اور اصغر خان صاحب کی یہ کمپوزیشن ہے، اور میر حسن میر بھائی نے اس کو پڑھا ہے. میں وہ کلام آپ لوگوں کی خدمت میں پیش کرتا ہوں. بر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. ماما کربلا دیا ماما، کربلا دیا ماما، پترا دیا لاشا دے ٹکڑے، ریا لب دیا بچ صحراواں، ماما کربلا دیا ماما. صبر دے مالک نو سین لیلا کھے، اذن جے دیویں تے میں صبر دی سانج چ اکبر دے سینے چو ساگ لہواں، ماما کربلا دیا ماما، ماما کربلا دیا ماما. آنکھے ماں قاسم دی ماتے احسان کری، دیر تئی لڑدا رویں، تیرے ٹکڑے مطابق ودنیاں نے میرے ویر حسین دساواں، ماما کربلا دیا ماما، ماما کربلا دیا ماما. جدو قیدی ہو کے لنگیاں مقتل چوں، وین زینب کیتا لاشاں ول ماوا نہ ویکھن، کتے رک نہ جاون ساواں، ماما کربلا دیا ماما، ماما کربلا دیا ماما. جی میں پھر پڑھ دیتا ہوں. جدو قیدی ہو کے लंगियां मकतल चों वैन ज़ैनब कीता लाशावल मावा ना वेखण किते रुक ना जावण सावा मावा करबला दिया मावा अल्लाहुम्मा सल्लि अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद वअज्जल फरजहुम.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد وعجل فرجهم ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك توعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين عليهم السلام. السلام عليك يا أبا صالح المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. My dearest brothers and sisters, on this final night of these 3 nights commemorating the tragedy of Arbaeen, we conclude the discussion that we started on the keys or the secrets or the principles of the perseverance of the Husseini movement. Over the last few nights we spoke about 2 of those fundamental principles. The first being that the will of Allah is that this movement be successful and it continue to be successful. And the second is that there is an element of righteous action, amalun salih, that we mentioned. And in the explanation, drawing from the Quran and the narrative of Nabi Nuh alayhi salam and his son, where the Quran speaks of the son of Nuh as the personification of unrighteous action, innahu amalun ghayru salih, we mentioned that righteous action is not just good behavior, moral action, rather it is to perform the action that is deemed divinely acceptable and that responds to the circumstances and the challenges of the time. And hence, in some circumstances, the next best option is deemed unacceptable Quranically. This inspires us to think critically and strategically about how we can respond to our challenges on a grassroots level, a community level, at a societal level, and then a global level. So we move on to the third of 7 points, and inshallah I will be mentioning these 5 remaining points tonight. The third is the concept of comprehensiveness. We know that representation matters. What our young people see around them, young or old, but mostly young, what they see around them positively or negatively shapes their expectations for themselves and for each other. And what is unique about Karbala is that it not only has a message and lessons that resonates with all people, we can say, but also it involves agents that are representative of most in society. We see ourselves represented in the case of Karbala. So representation is important because, as it said, if he or she can see it, then he or she can be it. From our children's early experiences, these shape what they imagine to be possible for people who look like them, live where they live, or come from where they come from. These are incredibly important factors that determine what our younger generation, our children, determine what they can be based on these examples. So Karbala is unique in this sense because it captures us in that event. We see ourselves represented there. And the comprehensiveness here of this story really is what makes it most attractive. It involves people of all different backgrounds and all different life circumstances and experience. You have the young, the old, the children, the babies. You have men, women. You have those who come from affluent backgrounds, those who don't come from high socioeconomic positions, those who are disrespected and relegated in society, and those who are considered to be elites in society. You have people from all different backgrounds here, and they are represented. But they find themselves on one of two sides. Either lending support to the cause of justice and the cause of change and the cause of resistance against an oppressive force, or they actively or passively support it. The active supporters of that injustice are those who were present, those who were happy with the fact that something like this was happening. They wanted to participate. We see that in today's world. Unfortunately, those who have their minds have been shaped in a way that they take pleasure in causing pain, harm, and extending injustice to other people. Then there are those that just can't stomach it. They don't want to be around and they don't want to see, but they know about it and they fail to act. Those also are part of this story. And some of us may find that these different actors and their reactions, they resonate with us. Either we find ourselves in similar positions, or we think like they think, and we can see the result of action, reaction, and inaction there. So that's the third element. There's a comprehensiveness here, that people find themselves represented. You don't find this in all places. So we use that to our benefit, to feel inspired. And this is one of the reasons why we continue to tell the stories of different individuals in the Karbala case. Number 4 is leadership. This is an invaluable principle and key, that not only is leadership so important, qualified leadership, but one leadership characteristic, or some call virtue, that informs and strengthens all other characteristics or virtues is the courage that a leader has. You know, Aristotle famously said that courage was the first virtue because it makes all other virtues possible. So, in the case of Karbala, we see leadership displayed. On the side of those fighting for justice, you have the Imam. But not just the Imam. That leadership, you can see, is extended from one supporter to another. That each of them not only are leaders and display the characteristics of leadership, but most importantly, they display that courage. The courage is to do something that is difficult at a time where others will not. So there were many uprisings, as we see in the history of early Islam, and if we want to just look at against the Umayyads, there are plenty of uprisings and rebellions and resistance movements, and generally throughout Islamic and non-Islamic history we have these. But there's reasons why some of them are successful in ways that others are not. So if you look at the case of resistance against the Umayyads, you have the uprising of Zayd ibn Ali, you have the uprising of Yahya ibn Zayd, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Sulaiman ibn Surad Khazai, you have the uprising of Abdullah ibn Hanzala, and the uprising of Mukhtar. All of these were there. Now, we don't want to say these were successful or unsuccessful, but definitely one of the factors that contributed to their success and failures was the quality of their leadership. So if we want to also draw inspiration from this, you may say, okay, well, the leadership was clear. It was the Imam of the time. And that Imam is divinely inspired. And of course, their decisions and their instructions, places a confidence in the hearts of their believers, their supporters. That is a true statement. But we must remember that the architect of the movement today, of resistance, of fighting for justice, of standing up against injustice, is an imam, a divinely appointed imam. And though the access that we have to this imam is different in the case of Imam al-Hussein and his companions, alayhimus salam, but the very fact is that that leadership is the same, and it is present. Now, we must strive to create networks, or at least participate in those networks that are able to establish leadership and maintain communication, guidance, and strategic direction with that. We are in dire need of leaders, and not just leaders that, they decide overnight that they want to take a position of leadership, but those who train themselves to be leaders. We know, even in this country, those families and those individuals who want to be groomed for leadership positions, for political positions, they have a process they undergo. They go to certain schools, they are granted access in certain societies, they fraternize and socialize with certain types of people. But I think more than that, there's an overarching ideology, there's a worldview, there's a way that they look at life, there are principles, there are values that they must uphold for them to be acceptable leaders within this working system. So I think the task for us is not just to look amongst ourselves and say, well, you're the leader or you're the leader. No. There should be some sort of apparatus. There should be a system whereby we define what those things are that we need, and then begin to kind of work back towards what are the resources that need to be made available, and the training that one has to go through to then be able to successfully perform those tasks. A lot of times we get stuck in thinking, what should we do and how can we do it and who do we need? One strategy that I've found very helpful is to start at the end. Speak about and describe what it is that you want or you need when everything is done. What does that ideal look like? What is that? Who does that leader look like? What is that leader doing in their role as a leader? What is that larger system? What is it producing? What are its values? So what does your world look like at that point? If it's interacting with a smaller or larger network of people, society, how does it interact with that? What is its purpose? Once you define that, then you start working back. Well, how do we get to this point? The step before that is this, the step before that, and you start kind of tracing those steps that are needed. Instead of starting at the beginning where we are right now and say, well, what should we do? We don't know where we're going to end up. So thinking about it from the result backwards until where we are may be helpful. And I think that's really helpful for leadership too. For leaders to know how they should be training themselves to be able to be effective leaders for what is needed, because we know leadership itself is based on the context of what they're asked to do. Yes, there are qualities that are shared, I think, amongst leaders, but there are certain skills that are needed for different types of leadership. For us to identify what those are, and then to begin to create those networks, those procedures, the plans, and then be supportive of those who want to at least embark on that journey of leadership so they can take those positions when the time comes. So redefining this idea of leadership, I think, is extremely crucial. I'm not saying for leadership to be defined based on how the wind is blowing. No. We can be informed by what is happening in society, but more than anything, I think it requires us to take a critical look at where we want to go, where do we want to end up, and then start asking how we get there. And then from there, I think it's clear what should be done and who are suitable and committed to then becoming leaders. So number 4 is leadership. That leadership can make or break the success, can make or break a movement. Number 5 is that this movement was in its truest sense, it was a justice-seeking movement and a justice-seeking group. And this is important because it seems so matter-of-fact, it seems so simple, but in today's world, we have a lot of justice-seeking that really is not that. Simply pledging allegiance with one's tongue or with an empty gesture, which includes maybe the contribution of small sums, and some I don't mean financially, but small amounts of support to the pursuit of peace, to the pursuit of justice, doesn't make a person justice-seeking, I think. They may be a sympathizer of those who are justice-seeking. They may want to be justice-seeking, so they have aspirations to, but they may not be characterized, I think, as justice seekers. We call these things performative activism, or maybe sometimes even wokeness. What's performative activism? It's an activism that is done to increase the social capital of the individual who is engaging in that action, instead of the devotion that one has to a cause. Again, notice how we spoke about slacktivism last night. It's less about the cause and it's more about the person who is engaging. So a person who is taking part in performative activism would rather let it be known that they are a seeker of justice, that they oppose discrimination, that they are not a racist, that they are not xenophobic, they're none of those things. That is more important in their engagement with the pursuit of justice than actually seeking to change the underlying problems, the oppressive structures, the racist structures within a system, within a country, and within the world. So again, performative activism, it's putting on a performance. We have a lot of this on larger levels. The individual levels is kind of hard to tell. What is your intentions? What do you want to do? I don't know if the right thing is for us to start looking at each other and start pointing fingers. We can have internal reflections, that's fine. But if you look at institutional levels, we have a lot of this performative activism right now because the world is calling for justice. It really is seeking justice. And it's expecting those in positions of power and influence to respond to this call, to this need, to this plea. So there's an expectation from these institutions to respond somehow. So there can't be no response. There must be a response. What is this response? For many of these corporations, that's what it is. Or these institutions, that's what it is. It's just performative activism. Yes, we support your cause. We support the fight for justice. Again, like I said last night, there's definitely utility in social medias, but these are the beginnings, or one means of being able to raise awareness and then mobilize the people to do something. But a simple hashtag is not going to change any reality. It may create an alternate reality in a virtual world, but it's not going to change it in the real world, as we call it. So there has to be something more that's done. And we have to be careful not to fall into the trap of being fooled by the performative activism that's performed by these corporations and these institutions. It's not about going one day and doing one thing and taking a few pictures and posting it for good. That's PR. That's PR. That is caring about what my public image is and how I'm perceived by my customers than it is for me actually supporting the cause of changing this problem. Now, I'm not saying that anyone who takes a picture or uses it, is aware of the public image aspect of it is engaging in performative activism. I'm not saying that. There can be a lot of positives that come in encouraging other people to do these things. That's fine. But when they do it simply just to placate and please the consumer and the customer to saying that we are also like you and we also, support the things that are important to you, that's when we really need to be aware. And I think a Muslim community really needs to be at the forefront of calling this stuff out. We've seen this before, obviously, because this is nothing new. If you remember in the mid '80s, when there was a growing environmental consciousness. So in the environmental awareness that was brought and the concerns that were brought in the mid '80s, there were many of these empty gestures that were made by corporations, which was termed greenwashing. So this term was coined and gained momentum, and what it means, really, greenwashing, is for companies to intentionally mislead their customers, their consumers, that their products or services were more environmentally friendly than their competitors, and as a result of that, they should purchase them. So whether it's their health or whether it's the actual environment, it's the creation, or rather the concoction, of the idea that they are assisting and they are part of the solution rather than being a part of the problem. Time after time after time, these companies have been exposed. They are the problem, not a part of the problem, but they always sell this facade of being a part of the solution. We need to be, number one, aware that we don't engage in any sort of performative activism. Again, I don't want to be too critical because these are complex issues. How we want to spread the message of Imam al-Hussein. That can also be a great example of our assessments of whether we are engaging in some sort of performative activism. But let's move past that. It's a sensitive topic. People get upset for whatever reason. I have my own personal thoughts on the efficacy of certain practices that are done, but at least I guess they're doing something. I'm not going to say marching or having a walk in the middle of a business district on a weekend, how effective is that going to be to spread the message? I don't know. I haven't done that research. I don't have those metrics. It's for those people who engage in these activities or others who ally to study them and really gauge the efficacy. Fine. But in other kind of areas in society, that really these are problems that require our engagement as an institution, because we are, whether we like it or not, we're representative of an institution, a religious institution. We are members of that body. Doesn't matter if we hold any sort of official position or not. We represent a group that wants to not only engage with the world, but wants to positively affect the world. And that's kind of what we're doing right now in coming together. We're reminding ourselves of the importance of the fight for justice. So we need to not only be wary that we don't engage in any level of performative activism, but we need to be on the front lines of calling organizations and others out who do this and informing and educating the people. So we read in Ziyarah Arbaeen yesterday, one of the main things that the Imam did, that he just continuously was admonishing the people, educating them, so that he would free them from the reins of ignorance. To effect any sort of positive social change at any level, but especially at a larger level, at a state level, at a country level, at a global level, people need to be informed and educated. They don't need to be attacked, they need to be informed. And so we can take on this responsibility of defining or helping people define what justice seeking really means. Justice seeking is more than just saying things. Justice seeking is reviving the spirit of not just marching in the streets, but being committed to the cause. And for the cause and its resolution to be the most important thing. And to see ourselves as contributors, but we are kind of secondary to the cause itself. So because of that, even some of the kind of concerns and sacrifices that we have to make, or even the pressures that it may put on our personal lives, We are willing and happy to do that because it is the cause that comes first. So as Muslims, we ask ourselves this question. The Quran asks this question for us. And in the pursuit of justice, in seeking justice, which is more important? Your personal comforts or the pursuit of justice? For everything to operate in a way that is to your liking, or the fact that progress is being made in liberating others and in turn liberating the self? This is some of the times that we get challenged because we want to do something good, but we forget to remove the self when it's needed from the scenario. So performative activism may also happen at this behavioral level, this akhlaqi level, that we want something good to be done and we even outline what we want to do, but because of these personal dynamics, we are not able to see that this issue is bigger than us. And then I think if we're not careful, the dynamics change. It's not about seeking justice anymore. It's about pleasing the self. So in the case of Karbala and Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, you had individuals who were seeking different things in their involvement. Those who were supporters of the Imam, for them it was made clear. That means they had gone through so many stages of being vetted that by the time came on the day of Ashura, they had already passed all those tests and there was a clarity of thought and a firm commitment that they had made with their hearts. There was no confusion, there was no second guessing, there was no doubt. But there were others that didn't make it that far, or there were others that were standing on the other side. They were there for political power, they were there for prestige, they were there for wealth, for revenge, for material possessions, for the easing of governmental pressure. Many of those who came were there because they were forced by the government. It's because if they didn't go, they would be considered to be, draft dodgers, that they wouldn't support this military intervention, and that they would have been jailed or beaten or tortured, or somehow they would have been punished. So they went to ease that pressure. They would attract attention to themselves, so they didn't want to. So they went just like everyone else. So there are a lot of different reasons why people were there. But those who stood alongside the Imam, all of these things were still there, but they had not only a clarity of decision, but there was a peace in their heart. In the war cries, when they came to the battlefields, you see this justice seeking on display. When Habib ibn Mudahir comes to the battlefield, he recites this battle cry. وَأَنْتُمْ عِنْدَ الْوَفَاءِ أَغْدَرُوا وَنَحْنُ أَوْفَى مِنْكُمْ وَأَصْبَرُوا. That when the time comes for you to be faithful to the vows that you made, you were treacherous. You were the same people that said you are seeking justice, and you would be supportive, welcoming, accommodating of leadership that would pursue that end. He continues, but we are more loyal than you and more perseverant in this pursuit of justice. And that's the difference between the two of us. So that's this next key, this idea of being justice seeking. That's not something that we can take for granted, even in the time where you have a social consciousness and a social awareness of justice and helping the oppressed. And this ties in, I think, very well to the sixth key. And that sixth key is the supporters that the Imam had. It wasn't just about the fact that they were striving for justice. I think they were a unique group of individuals. Not that they were cut from a different cloth and that they were at birth something different. No. The decisions that they had made in their lives prepared them to be like this, and it also gave them what I call a spiritedness. There was something that they had, that they were just so driven in this pursuit of justice that even in the most difficult of circumstances, you don't find them upset. You don't find them frustrated. You don't find them defeated. You find them driven. You find them committed. You find them full of passion. And they are at peace. So finding that. And we know examples, again, because of our time restraints, we have plenty of examples in the Quran where you have great leadership, right? In the case of Nabi Musa alayhi salam and the Israelites. Great leadership. There's a prophet that's leading them, and they had already seen the fruits of his leadership. They'd been liberated from the hands of Fir'aun. But still, when the time comes for them to enter into the Holy Land, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, they respond like they did. قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ ادْخُلُوا الْأَرْضَ الْمُقَدَّسَةَ. They responded, قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى إِنَّ فِيهَا قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. So there is a tyrannical people there. We're not going to go until they leave. وَإِنَّا لَن نَدْخُلَهَا حَتَّى يَخْرُجُوا مِنْهَا. So leadership there wasn't the problem. It's not like Musa was having a bad day. No, he was a good leader. The people were just not driven. They were going to fight for justice, but they were going to do it on their terms. And obviously that's a problem. But the companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, and I think as an extension just the mu'mineen have a certain spiritedness that they're driven to do things. From Imam alayhi salatu wasalam, it's narrated that the joy of a believer, surur al-mu'min, is rooted in his or her obedience to their Lord. And their sorrow is due to their disobedience. When they do something that pleases God, they're happy because of it. When they do something that's displeasing to God, they are upset over it. That's really what determines their states of happiness or sorrow. Yes, pressures of life come, but that true sense of happiness, that true sense of joy, that only comes when they know that they've applied themselves to something that gives their life meaning and purpose. And the fight for justice is exactly that. Even if the person experiences loss, material loss, that is not a reason for sorrow. Yes, a person may lose something and may naturally feel, a sense of, as they say, material loss, or even when they miss someone. But in the larger scheme, they know that there's nothing that they've lost. It's not like that thing is inaccessible anymore. It's just a temporary change. It's not even a setback. It's a temporary separation. And it's the nature of this life and the nature of this world. We have to deal with it. Yeah, that evokes emotions. But a person is not upset over that. Or a mu'min at least is not upset over that. In the early Islamic history, we have examples of people who were so driven. There was a story from one of the early battles in Islam. There was a father and a son who both really wanted to go to fight, to participate in one of the battles of the Holy Prophet. The father said, "I really want to go," and the son said, "No, you're old. I want to go." And they kept, arguing with one another until they finally decided, "We can't decide. Let's flip a coin, so to speak." They flipped the coin. The son won, and the son went to battle. He achieved martyrdom. The father he's proud of his son. He's happy that his son went, and he's happier that his son was martyred, but he felt a little upset that why couldn't he go and achieve martyrdom? So he sees his son in a dream. And his son is saying that I'm in a great place and my Lord is taking care of me here. So the father comes to the Holy Prophet and he says, make dua. Make dua for me. The Prophet ﷺ says, for what? He says, I want to become a martyr just like my son. I know the opportunity passed, but I still have this hope. The Holy Prophet says that I'll pray for you. And he did, and they say within a year another opportunity came, the father went, he became shaheed. In another example, we have very similar. It's a group of fathers, a father and a group of sons. Father's name is Amr ibn Jamuh. That again, another opportunity comes for them to fight. The sons are all preparing to go to battle, and the father says, I want to come. The sons all refused, and there was a reason. The reason was that the father had a limp. He couldn't walk without limping. And we know that the Quran says that individuals who are not who cannot perform in battle effectively, those who are blind, ليس على الأعمى حرج ولا على الأعرج حرج, and for those who have a limp, they also, there's no blame on them for them not to engage in battle. So the sons are telling him, not only are you not obligated to go fight, but you're not going to be an effective fighter because you have a limp. So not only that, you're also going to distract us. So the sons are trying to convince the father that the battlefield is no place for you in this state. The father's upset, he's not listening. The father said, I'm going to do what I want to do. They tried to convince him, bringing family members and relatives, no one would listen. Finally, they went to the presence of the Holy Prophet. They said, this is our father, he's not listening to us. And the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, responded, okay, leave him alone. Leave him alone. This man longs for martyrdom. His decision has been made. And it's true that he's not obligated, as the Quran states, but it's also not disallowed. So, the sons accept. They all gear up to go to battle. And as the battle is taking place, the sons are kind of like looking out for the father. And they're telling the father, just hang back, don't go too far into enemy lines, and, do what you can do from here. And it's almost like he's distracting his sons. And the father, instead of kind of staying back and listening, he charges the enemy even more because of the passion that he has, the commitment that he has. He really wants to do something. He really wants to contribute. He's not going to let this be an impediment for him to do what he knows needs to be done. So he charges the enemies in ways that his sons did not. After the war was done, the father, one of the sons, and one other member of the family, relative, achieved martyrdom. So as they were, the families in Medina were coming to collect the bodies, the wife of this man and the mother of these children, she's coming and she prepares, camel, horse or whatever to come and collect the bodies. So they come and they prepare the bodies, they put them on the camel, and they start going back to Medina. And this woman notices that the camel is not traveling normally. It's almost resistant. Every time they turn away from Medina, going back home, the camel operates and goes normally. But anytime they are directed towards Medina to go back home, the camel is struggling. So on the way back from the battlefield, they interact with another group of people that are coming from Medina to the battle, and they interact with one of the wives of the Prophet. This woman explains what's happening. They said, let's go see the Prophet. They turn around and they go back, and the Prophet's there, and the wife is saying that something odd is happening. And the Prophet asked the wife, did your husband say anything before he left? She said, as a matter of fact, he did. Before he left the house to go and fight, he said, he made a prayer. He said, oh Allah, I ask that you never return me to this home. He wasn't upset with his family, by the way. But that's just a decision that he had made. It's a hope that he had, that when he goes, he doesn't return alive, but if he's going to return, he returns a martyr. And the Prophet said that's exactly it. Allah has accepted his dua, and he doesn't want to return home. Don't go and bury his body in the graveyard and cemetery that you have prepared for him there. Rather leave him here with the rest of the shuhada and have him be buried here. So there's just something about those who are committed to this cause. They're so passionate about it. And especially I think their passion and their spiritedness is infectious. That there's something about them that they also drive other people. So we see this in the statements of the companions of the Imam. We know on the night of Ashura, when the Imam says, you're free to go. I've relieved you from any sort of bay'ah that you have given. You don't have any obligations to stay here. And they say, I wish that I could not be martyred once for you. I wish I could be martyred 1,000 times. That's not just something that's said. It's a belief that the companions of Imam al-Hussein have. So I'll share one more story, a contemporary example. Again, I draw from some of the shuhada of recent times. One of the shaheeds, my name is Shahid Ahmad al-Qazimi. He served in the sacred defense um, in post-revolutionary Iran. And this is a story that's narrated from his son. The son says that my university was close to my father's place of work, and we used to commute together. And naturally, I had to wait for him to finish. I would go to class, and then I'd finish class, I would come, I'd do my homework, I'd relax a little bit, I'd read a little bit, then I'd get bored, and my father was still at work. So we'd commute, and most of the times we wouldn't come home before 8 or 9 p.m. So on the ride back, I was resting, but by the time I got home, I was exhausted, he said. But my father, when he would enter the house, he would enter as if it's the beginning of the morning, like he had just waken up, with an energy. He'd come in, smiling, and he would, embrace the family and express his love and affection to them and thank them and, respect them and all that. He said, I was always amazed at the level of my father's spirits and my father's energy. If we look really to those who serve these causes sincerely, we can see a level of devotion. And I think that's really what we need to capture. We need to capture that spirit of devoutness. That we are so committed to that pursuit of justice, to serving the cause of the Imam, may Allah hasten his reappearance, that even when we are tired, we feel good about that fatigue. And that drives us to do even more. And when we see others around us that are not feeling motivated, they're feeling a little down, they're feeling like life has got to them, and they need help, that we are there in the trenches to support them, to console them, to assist them. What is it that they need? We are brothers, sisters, comrades. We are all co-workers, peers, colleagues, in service to the Imam and in service to the pursuit of justice. So we need to be there to help each other, as would, fellow soldiers or teammates or colleagues. But that spirit really, I think, is what's most important. And we need to capture that. And we need to promote it. Those people within our communities that have that, not just a working spirit, but they're driven. That we ensure that they remain driven, motivated, and that we also kind of take a little bit of that energy too and find it within ourselves. We have a group of people that believe and have hope that something good can come and change can be made. And number 7, and I'll briefly just mention this because I think it's the one that's most familiar, and that is the tragedy of the Ahlul Bayt. What makes this movement so unique is not just that a tragedy occurred, but what happened and how it happened, and the fact that we keep this tragedy and its memory alive. As we recite in different ziyarat, Ya Aba Abdullah, لَقَدْ عَدُمَتِ الرَّزِيَّةِ, unbearable is the sorrow. وَجَلَّتْ وَعَدُمَتِ الْمُصِيبَةِ, and excruciating and unbearable is the misfortune. بِكَ عَلَيْنَا, of us, وَعَلَى جَمِيعَ أَهْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ, and for the entirety of the people of Islam. وَجَلَّتْ وَعَدُمَتْ مُصِيبَتُكَ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ عَلَى جَمِيعَ أَهْلِ السَّمَاوَاتِ. Not only that, but how great, excruciating, and unbearable is your misfortune, your sorrow, your pain, your tragedy in the heavens and those who inhabit the heavens. So we acknowledge the severity, the intensity of this tragedy. But it's not just that. What drives this movement for this to persevere until today is the preservation of that memory. And that is something, again, look at the leadership, that they played a crucial role in establishing this culture of telling and retelling the story. Because when the story is told and the story is heard, that affects the heart. It pierces the heart. Not only does it get a person to think, who would do such a thing? Why would they do it? They connect on a human level. But then they start asking the other questions. Why was this done? Why in this fashion? What did the two sides stand for? And then a person really is put in a position to make a decision. Do I want to be a supporter of this side or that? Do I want to be an advocate for justice, or do I want to be an oppressor? Or do I want to stay silent when an oppressor is doing these things? And then the connections are made. What happened in Karbala is for this reason. And reasons like this, because of reasons like this, today you see the continuation of this type of treatment for people who are not only innocent, but they're guilty of wanting justice and fighting for justice. That's their crime. And things like this continue to be done in the world. So we tell this story and we are instructed by the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam, Lady Zainab and others, they take it upon themselves and make it a part of the work that they do to tell this story, to tell it accurately, and to retell it. So that that memory remains alive. When we remember these things, we are reminded not just of that the incredible pain, the suffering, the difficulty, but also we're reminded of some realities of what's happening around us. And we need that. We're reminded the Imam is an occultation. Why? What is going to be done to change the course of society? You need people like the Imam, and you need people like the supporters of the Imam that are committed to that. And then we remember, oh wait, now I'm sitting in a Majlis. I'm here because I have a love, I have a reverence, I have a respect, and I have an aspiration to be like those individuals. I also want to be there. I also want to do something. So then a person finds himself in a position to make some decisions and perhaps make some changes. And that's why not only are we so insistent, this is not an insistence that we have concocted. It is an instruction from the Ahlul Bayt to tell and retell this story. We know in the many narrations that we have, just look to Kamil Ziyarat, so many narrations that speak on the merits and the rewards of people who shed a tear for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Why? It's not just to say, okay, shed tear, go to paradise, and you shed tear, go to paradise. It's not about that. It's about shed the tear, purify the soul, enliven yourself, and become conscious again of what is happening, and make a decision to be a supporter of justice. That tear does that. That pain for Imam al-Hussein does that. And that's why it's so powerful. Yes, there are a lot of different tragedies that have happened in history, and they will continue to happen. I'm not saying that they are ineffective, but there's something special here. And we use this and channel this. And I think one of the great things that we can do, a great service, is to also revive this culture of telling and retelling the stories with emotion in other tragedies in the world, so they don't forget. That's one of the problems that we face. Even in this country, if people were continuously told the stories of the atrocities that were committed to indigenous and minorities throughout this country's history, I think we would have a different attitude and a different take and a sense of urgency in trying to resolve these problems. This is not America hating. It's not. It's about being honest, and it's about being conscious and doing the right thing. When something bad happens, we naturally want to forget it, we want to conceal it, because it exposes us, because it embarrasses us, because it puts on display a failure of ours. Embracing failure and using that to better yourself is the sign of a courageous individual and a courageous society. If we want to be courageous, we should encourage others to also, I think, take on this culture. Tell the stories accurately, evoke the emotions, and call for change. So we conclude here these 7 keys that explain the perseverance of the Husseini movement, and through this we are inspired to reflect on these 7 and see how we can engage with them, better ourselves, and how we can better our groups, our communities, but also how can we begin to develop strategies, develop programs, develop institutions, develop something that will help serve the cause and in ways that are effective. We remember that the victory will come, that is the will of God, but also that we find this righteous action that needs to be done and be a little bit more demanding, raise the standards of what we're doing and what we want to accomplish. Then from there, remember that we are represented, all are welcome. It's not about being exclusive. We are all welcome so long as we feel connected to the story of Imam al-Hussein and want to better ourselves and better others. We are welcome here. Then after that, we find that we're able to train good leadership. We're able to establish a spiritedness and a devoutness to what we do. We tell and retell this story. And finally, we seek justice in its truest sense. Inshallah, a few minutes we will recite Musibah as we not bid farewell, because Arbaeen is not the end of anything. Arbaeen really is a newfound sense of commitment to the cause of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam. And yes, it is a time that we are reminded, and again, we renew the fervor, the energy, the emotion, the passion, and the spirit that we have of love and reverence toward the Imam. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. When the caravan of Abu Abdullah, the Ahlul Bayt, are returning to Medina, it is reported that Zainul Abidin stops the caravan outside of the city, erects the tent, and instructs Bashir ibn Hadlam, "O Bashir, your father was a poet. Are you also a poet? Can you recite poetry?" Bashir says, "Yes, my master, yes, the son of the Holy Prophet." The Imam instructs him, "O Bashir, go to Medina and announce the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah. Announce the arrival of the caravan of Al-Hussein." Bashir says, "I rode my horse rushing into the city. When I reached the mosque of the Holy Prophet, I raised my voice, weeping while I recited, يا أهل يثرب لا مقام لكم بها قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار الجسم منه بكربلاء مدرج والرأس منه على القناة تدار." O people of Medina, hear me when I say, Medina is no longer your place, for Hussein has been killed, making me weep all the time. His bleeding body was left in Karbala, and his holy head was moved from place to place on a spear. The caravan of Hussein returns without its leader, without its master. Bashir says, "This is Ali ibn al-Hussein who has come with the remainder of this caravan outside of Medina, with his aunts, with his sisters, with the children. I am the messenger informing you of their arrival." It is said that the inhabitants of Medina came out, women with their faces unveiled, screaming, weeping, crying. They wept loudly in mourning, reported that after the death of the Holy Prophet, Medina had not seen such mourning. These people rushed outside where the caravan of Ahlul Bayt had settled. Zainul Abidin rushes outside of the tents with a handkerchief in his hand, wiping away his tears. A servant put a chair for the Imam to sit. The Imam sits on the chair. He conducts the Majlis for the people of Medina of what happened in Karbala. The voice of weeping men and women rent the whole atmosphere. Everyone from every side was consoling the Imam. The land had turned into a place of mourning. Zainul Abidin signals with his hand for silence. All the people stop crying. Zainul Abidin wants to tell them exactly what happened. فقال الحمد لله رب العالمين. All praise is due to Allah. نحمده على عذائم الأمور وفجائع الدهور وألم الفجائع ومضاضة اللواذع وجليل الرزق وعظيم المصائب الفاضعة الكاظة الفادحة الجائحة. O people, all praise is due to Allah over the great affairs, the tragedies of the times, the bitterness of the scoldings, over the crushing difficulties and hardships. أيها القوم, O people, إن الله وله الحمد ابتلانا بمصائب جليلة وثلمة في الإسلام عظيمة. Allah has tried us with a great affliction and a great break in Islam. قتل أبو عبد الله الحسين وعترته وسبي نساؤه وسبيته. They martyred your master Abu Abdullah, his household, his companions. They imprisoned his wives and his daughters. وداروا برأسه في البلدان من فوق عامل السنان. They carried his holy head on a spear from place to place, from city to city. وهذه الرزية التي ليس مثلها رزية. This is a calamity unparalleled. If you were there to see how they were paraded from one city to another, the people gathered to watch them as prisoners, as rebels. أيها الناس فأي رجالات منكم يصرون بعد قتل أو مدينة. How can any of your inhabitants be joyful after hearing this? أم أي فؤاد لا يحسن من أجله. Who can stop their tears from rolling from their eyes? Who can be stingy in their weeping? For indeed the seven heavens wept over the martyrdom of Abu Abdullah. All in the heavens and in the earth wept for the killing of our master. أيها الناس أي قلب لا ينصدع لقتل. O people, which heart is so hard that has not been shocked by the martyrdom of Imam al-Hussein. أم أي فؤاد لا يحن إليه. Which soul has not inclined towards him. أيها الناس, people, let me tell you what we experienced. أصبحنا مطرودين مشردين مذودين وشاسعين عن الأمصار. O people, we spent our time in such a condition. When they took us captive, they expelled us from land to land. We were scattered. We were driven off away from city and villages as if we were captives and slaves, without any fault of ours, without any harm of ours to Islam. We had not heard such a thing from our predecessors. The treatment was so bad, O people, by Allah. لو أن النبي تقدم إليهم في قتالنا كما تقدم إليهم في الوصاية بنا لما زادوا على ما فعلوا بنا. If the Prophet had encouraged this nation to declare war against us, kill us instead of recommending our reverence and love, we would not have been treated worse than they treated us on this journey. فإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. من مصيبة ما أعظمها. Surely to Allah do we belong, and to Allah is our return. فعند الله نحتسب فيما أصابنا وما بلغ بنا فإنه عزيز ذو انتقام. We forward our complaints to Allah over such a terrible calamity, for verily He is mighty and powerful to take revenge. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين.
معزز سامعین، مولا آپ کو کوئی غم نہ دے سوائے مظلوم کربلا کے. مولا آپ تمام لوگوں کی توفیقات میں اضافہ کرے، بالخصوصاً سٹی آف نالج کی جانب سے جنہوں نے یہ پروگرام کا انعقاد کیا. مولا ان کی توفیقات میں اضافہ کرے. اس کے ساتھ ہی اس وقت ہمارے ساتھ لائیو ہے کراچی پاکستان سے سید رضا عباس زیدی. میں گزارش کروں گا کہ وہ آ کے مولا کی بارگاہ میں نواخوانی مسیح نازنی پیش کریں. پر محمد و آل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. مومنین کرام، سب سے پہلے میں شکر گزار ہوں سٹی آف نالج کا، جن کے تعاون سے چہلم کے اس پروگرام کو آپ تمام مومنین دیکھ رہے ہیں، اور آصف علی بھائی کا بھی شکر گزار ہوں کہ انہوں نے مجھے داخل ثواب کیا. مولا آپ تمام مومنین کی چہلم کی اس عبادت کو اپنی بارگاہ میں پروردگار قبول و منظور فرمائے. ایک سلام اور دونوں ہے آپ مومنین کی سماعتوں کی نظر کر رہا ہوں. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا، تو اپنے بازوں کے ہے، تو اپنے بازوں کے نیل اپنی ماں کو دکھا. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا، بتا رہی ہے جو بالوں میں دھول ہے بی بی، کہ خاک پر علی اصغر سا پھول ہے بی بی. تو راکھ جھولے کی زینب، تو راکھ جھولے کی زینب، لحد پہ ماں کی دکھا. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. اٹھا. نہ ہے نہ محمد نہ قاسم و اصغر، ہے ان کے بعد لحد کی طرح ہمارا گھر. میں ایک لاش ہوں اماں، ہے میں ایک لاش ہوں اماں، میں اب کہاں زندہ. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. لاہو بھرا ہوا کرتا تیرے حسین کا ہے، لہو جو روتا ہے بیٹا تیرے حسین کا ہے. بچھانے آئی ہوں اماں، ہے بچھانے آئی ہوں اماں، میں آج فرش عزا. مدینہ آ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. یہ ایک جوان جو بوڑھا دکھائی دیتا ہے، ارے یہی گیا عابد مزتر تمہارا پوتا ہے. گلے کے طوق نے اس کی کمر کو توڑ دیا. مدینہ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. سکینہ ساتھ گئی تھی جو ساتھ آ نہ سکی، وہ گھٹ کے مر گئی اماں رہائی پا نہ سکی. میں شام جاؤں گی اماں، میں شام جاؤں گی، بچے سے ہے میرا وعدہ. مدینہ آ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. لرز لرز گیا مرقد رسول زادی کا، وہ بین زینب مزتر کے تھے ریحان و رضا. رہائی پاک کے لحد پہ، رہائی پاک کے لحد پہ یہ پہلا تھا پرسا. مدینہ آ گیا زینب ذرا نگاہیں اٹھا. یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہواں کا. چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہواں کا. ماتم کرو مومنو شاہ شہیداں کا. چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا. یہ اس کا چہلم ہے اب تک ہے جو بے کفن، گھوڑوں کی ٹاپوں سے پامال ہے خستہ تن. جانے پیمبر ہے زہرا کا ہے گل بدن، اس کو کفن کیسے دے خود بیردا ہے بہن چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا اصغر کی ماں دیکھو گھٹ گھٹ کے روتی ہے وارث ہے مقتل میں مٹی میں موتی ہے کلثوم اشکوں کی لڑیاں پہ روتی ہے والی سکینہ بھی زندہ میں سوتی ہے چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا ماتم کرو مومنو شاہ شہیداں کا زندہ سے چھٹ کر بہن پہنچی جو دکھ پائی دریا پہ مومنو ایک لاش تھرائی زینب نے رو کر کہا اٹھو میرے بھائی دیکھو تمہاری بہن زندہ سے ہو آئی چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا ماتم کرو مومنو شاہ شہیداں کا چہلم کرو مومنو کربل کے مہماں کا یا حسین یا حسین جب سنا صغرا نے لوٹایا وطن میں قافلہ آئے جب پہنچی تو منظر دیکھ کر رو کے کہا اے پھوپھی اماں بڑا گھر تھا بھائیوں سے میرا کیا ہوا کربو بلا میں کچھ تو بتلائیں ذرا ہائے روتے ہوئے زینب نے کہا اے صغرا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا باپ جیتا بھی تو کس طرح سے یہ غم سہ کے بھائی کو پیار ہی اتنا تھا علی اکبر سے جس گھڑی سینہ اکبر سے سنا کو کھینچا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا ہائے جس مشق میں اصغر کے لیے تھا پانی ہاں اسی مشق میں سانسیں تھیں میرے غازی کی نہر پر مشق پہ جب تیر لگا پانی بہا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا ساتھ عباس تھے اکبر تھے بڑی ڈھارس تھی کس میں جرت تھی نظر غم پہ اٹھاتا کوئی تھا، یہی ایک سبب ہم جو ہوئے بے پردہ، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ تیرا بھائی رہا، نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا، یہ تو اچھا ہی ہوا تم نہ گئے کربلا، تم سے دیکھا ہی نہیں جاتا جو میں نے دیکھا، سینہ اکبر کا چھدا کٹ گیا سرور کا گلا، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا، بس تیرے واسطے آئی ہے مدینے زینب، ورنہ مقصد میرے جینے کا نہیں کوئی بھی اب، ہائے اب کون سہارا ہے میرے جینے کا، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا، فاطمہ بنت حسن سے یہ کہا کچھ بولو، بھیا قاسم بھی نہیں آتے نظر کیوں مجھ کو، فاطمہ بنت حسن کہنے لگی اے صغرا، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا، کیسی بہنوں پہ جدائی یہ قیامت لائی، ساری بہنوں کی صداؤں میں تھا بھائی بھائی، سن کے ذیشان و رضا رویا مدینہ سارا، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا، ہائے روتے ہوئے زینب نے کہا اے صغرا، نہ تیرا بھائی رہا نہ ہی میرا بھائی رہا۔
سلامت رہیں رضا بھائی، مولا آپ کی توفیقات میں اضافہ کرے، مولا آپ کو کوئی غم نہ دے سوائے مظلوم کربلا کے۔ بہت بہت ممنون ہوں، شکر گزار ہوں سٹی آف نالج کی جانب سے آپ کا کہ آپ نے ہماری بات کا مان رکھا، کیونکہ ہم تو پیدا ہی اس مقصد کے لیے ہوئے ہیں، اور جتنے بھی مومنین و مومنات ہمیں دیکھ رہے ہیں، مولا آپ تمام لوگوں کی بھی توفیقات میں اضافہ کرے۔ سٹی آف نالج کی جانب سے یہ پروگرام کا انعقاد کیا گیا تھا، مولا ان کی تمام نیک حاجات کو اپنی بارگاہ میں قبول و مقبول فرمائے۔ زندگی بخیر، آپ لوگوں سے پھر ملاقات ہوگی، تب تک کے لیے مجھے اجازت دیں۔ اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد و عجل فرجہم۔ السلام علیکم یا علی مدد۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء يا سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين، وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا قمر بني هاشم يا أبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا أم المصائب يا زينب بنت أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليكم يا شهداء كربلاء جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء يا علي بن موسى رضا راضي بالقدر والقضاء. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان. يا سيدي أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.